Aha! Did I just catch you listening to a sentenced album after the second one? How disgraceful. Your metal cred is in the toilet. Surprise flex!
Man, fuck you, it has good guitar work.
You know, it's really quite interesting, YouTube. Actually, I think you were just beating off to that Finnish broad's voice.
Fuck off, Styx, you listen to newer Marduk. Will your metal credibility ever recover from this? Let's find out. No. No. Get away from me. Get out of my head. You're not even real. Stop it. You're not even real. You're not real.
Sorry, Cassie.
What a horrible nightmare. Wait a minute. Oh, God. I can't move. Ah!
Alright, so we are on episode 13. Okay, requisite JoJo reference out of the way. I'm going to attempt to reestablish my metal credibility in lieu of that horrible nightmare by reviewing a really obscure death metal album. So this album deals less with gore and guts and violence and more with themes of insanity, which I of course know nothing about.
What? I'm not insane. You hear me? I'm not insane!
So we're going to be talking about Atrocity's Longing for Death album, their second one, also known as Todessensucht in the original German, which I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation of. Sorry! So, Atrocity started out, I want to say 1990, with their first album was called Hallucinations, and it was like a concept album about the decaying mind of a drug-addicted harlot, and there's all kinds of like weird rape and stuff going on. It's actually pretty disturbing, but a cool thing they did was they would take a musical phrase like this out of a solo like this, and almost kind of use it as a sample later in the album like this. So they're kind of looping that phrase from the solo as a sample to lead in as an intro. And then you can see here the riffs are very strange. They would like cut up riffs and play parts of them backwards and stuff. So there was definitely a focus on making a weird atmosphere through fucking around with tempos and stuff like that. So that's their first album, Hallucinations. Highly recommended if you haven't heard it yet. It uses kind of like the Leprosy death style of death metal and takes it to strange places. And on their second album, they get substantially weirder. For starters, they go from just using phrases from a solo as an occasional sample to lead into another track to full-blown leitmotifs. Now, what the hell is a leitmotif? Leitmotif is a form of composition that was pioneered by Richard Wagner way back in the 1800s, where he would use certain themes within his operas to introduce characters and emotions, and depending on what state that character was in, the leitmotif would have its tone changed around. There'd be little variations on it. So here's what Atrocity does with that kind of thing. They introduce the first song on the album with kind of an orchestral intro like this. So that intro kind of gives a background to the main theme, then they beef it up with some guitars like this. And then they finally introduce sort of this leitmotif figure, which goes a little something like this. Very heavy guitars. Then here comes the Leitmotif being played on the lead guitar. Kind of a spooky, spiderwebby sort of lead guitar line. Why do I call this an example of a Wagnerian Leitmotif? Well, this first song is called Todessensucht, the name of the album. The album also ends with another track called Todessensucht, where they take that same lead melody, but now that this whole album has gone through this journey of insanity, they turn it inside out to signify the death of our humble protagonist with this little variation on it. So, same heavy guitar riff, introducing the motif. Here it comes. Oh no, I was wrong. Never mind, it's after this one. Sorry, guys! They're playing it on a synth and they're turning it inside out. Very interesting stuff. Very spooky. Ooh. Even got a little evil laugh at the end there from Alexander Kroll, the vocalist who wrote most of the music as far as I'm aware. And to hammer home the Wagnerian point, they even quote from Richard Wagner's Götterdämmerung, Twilight of the Gods, the Siegfried Funeral March, a piece of music which Wagner wrote to kind of communicate a connection to a lot of the old Germanic paganism, and I would expect holds spiritual significance for a lot of Germans, which I know, LARPy pagans, you know, whatever. I don't give a fuck what you say.
From my point of view, the Jedi are evil!
But anyways, they use the Siegfried Trauermarsch, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, with a little intro to the song called Sky Turned Red, with like this. You've probably heard plenty of movies rip this one off before, I'm willing to bet. Very solemn. I like the wind sound effect they've put in the background. So that would be the intro to Sky Turned Red. And then during, well, I wouldn't exactly call it a chorus because these songs don't really follow verse-chorus structure at all. During the, so to speak, refrain of Sky Turns Red, they bring the Siegfried theme back and do their own variation on it. Heavy riff. Time changes. There we go. Very gothic and dark. Clean vocals in tandem with death metal. I like it. I like it a lot. Also, a thing that they do on this album that's pretty cool is a lot of wacky texture variation, a lot more than you would typically expect in a death metal album from this time period. You can actually hear the bass. That's pretty unusual for a Morris sound recording. So, wacky drumming going on, cool bass textures, and then check out this lead intro. Very spooky sounding. There we go. That's the good shit. So yeah, a lot of interesting textures for a death metal album. They also use a lot of different weird tempos and start-stop riffs, like with this one. That's pretty heavy. You know, one of the guys from Lamb of God described the band Breadwinner as having riffs that felt like a cardboard box falling down the stairs. I think Atrocity does a much better job than either of those trash bands do when it comes to that. That's a good metaphor. So yeah, no, good riffs. I like this album a lot. The only problem with this is with Atrocity you have Hallucinations, which is really good, Todessensucht, which is one of the greatest death metal albums of all time. But when it comes to later Atrocity, they went from being perhaps the leading example of black metal and death metal being the modern equivalent of classical music to making progressively worse decisions with each album. They did an album of like 80s covers. They did an album called Blut that was supposed to be about Dracula that I was like, oh man, this must be good. But no, it's fucking awful. It's indescribably bad. They got really fucking shitty. And I don't know why it happened. I wish it hadn't. But anyways, check out those first 2 albums. They're great. See you next time.
Growing up, Lisa was treated like a princess in the family. She really loved food a whole lot. 'Cause she was always eating more than anybody else.
But sometimes my mom also used food as a punishment. I remember this one time I asked for some cake. She wouldn't give it to me. I didn't understand. So I just took my finger and just rubbed all the icing off the cake. And my mama called me and she said, I know ain't nobody done this but you. And she set me down and said I had to eat the whole cake.